we looked back on 2023, gave our Dissident of the Year awards. Now we will look ahead to 2024. We have 10 predictions, 5 from each of us. And so Russell will go first. This is a sort of sequel to last year's prediction. So this is Russell's first of 5 for 2024.
This is the Empire Strikes Back of predictions.
Right.
All right. So I believe this is the year that the Tesla story comes apart. Companies have stories, and when those stories are intact and people believe in them, they invest and they put in money and their products sell. I believe what's going on with Tesla is going to pierce the idea, very much like Apple. Their brand is built around, Elon Musk said it himself at an event. Do you want the best car? Okay, well, when the wheels are literally coming off of these cars, can you continue to say these are the best cars? You have now senators demanding that Tesla order a recall based on a recent Reuters report. Cybertruck wound up after a prolonged wait costing a lot more than it was supposed to and offering a lot less in terms of features and range. It's also been getting terrible safety evaluations from consumer safety groups. You also have a lot of competition, not just from Western car companies, but from Chinese car companies are starting to manufacture very high-selling electric vehicles. And on top of that, the market for electric vehicles is starting to decelerate. Now, for companies like Ford and GM, no problem. Just sell more gas-powered vehicles. They can shift gears like that. Ford already pulled back on its EV production in response to the market. Tesla is an EV company. They don't have a gas-powered car division. So in my opinion, next year is going to be very rough for Tesla. That is the year that the narrative is going to come apart. It's going to be very much like as if all of a sudden Apple computers, kind of like Keaton's computer, started fucking up a lot, right? And then the whole Apple story of quality and reliable engineering started to come apart. As we see in that Reuters article, that's always been a myth with Tesla. And some people said when we reviewed the predictions, oh, you just hate Elon. I mean, as far as his class of scumbag, robber baron billionaires go, I like him better than Gates and Zuckerberg. I mean, I like him better than his peers in the scumbag billionaire space. It's nothing personal about Elon. I've just always thought that he was more showman than person really I never saw him as a Steve Jobs. I never saw him as somebody who was actually delivering what he claimed he was delivering. I always saw him as a bullshit artist, and I think that's becoming more clear.
All right, my first of 5 predictions. This is a bold one. It's hard to predict. I mean, as you will see in my last of these 5, it's tough to say what 2024 brings. These are very chaotic and very uncertain times. But we had a super chatter earlier in the stream say something to this effect, and I am going to predict that Biden will not be on the November ticket. I just don't see it. Maybe call this a hunch, but I just can't see us getting to a place where in almost a year from now, that guy is actually on the ballot. And you could say it's because of his health. You could say it's because he's falling apart. But I think what really puts it over the top is that he is alienating the base of the party that the Democrats might feel they can trick into voting for a Newsom figure, because Biden now, with his response to the Israel war, has completely alienated the Arab vote, which makes Michigan almost impossible to win, and that could be the whole race right there. And then young people, he's actually losing to Donald Trump, and that has a lot to do with the student debt, but it also has a lot to do with the Israel war. And so they might feel like, it's one thing to alienate the moderates. You can always kind of win the moderates back at the last minute. That's why they're moderates. They're undecided. They don't pay much attention. But when you start seeing your numbers collapse with these core pieces of the base in ways that they might not with a replacement like Newsom, because they figure, well, his hands aren't as dirty on this issue because he wasn't president. They may feel that's what they need to do. And I have a sense that they're going to do that. And I think the Hunter Biden legal woes give them a great excuse. This is a hunch, but it's just hard for me with a crystal ball to see him being on the ballot in November. So that would be a prediction.
I would co-sign that. I'm with you.
All right. There we go. All right. Russell has another election prediction.
Everybody who watches the show knows my take on this. It is my belief that by hook or by crook, by court or by CIA guy with piano wire, they're not going to let this guy be the president again.
Yeah, right.
That is my take. That continues to be my take. That the deep state, the establishment, the people who really run shit, they're not letting Donald Trump be the president again, no matter what it takes.
Yeah. I have not rendered a prediction on who the president will be because just like Tucker Carlson said in that, very ominous speech that he gave, which we covered on our show a few months ago, I don't think it's going to be Biden. I don't think he's going to be on the ticket. Trump would almost certainly win if the election were today, but the election's not today. The Republican establishment and the permanent establishment has plenty of time to swap him out for someone who they like more. So it's really difficult to say who the next president is going to be. I don't have a guess for that, which is kind of weird going into 2024. The big question is who's going to win? It's impossible to say to the point where I couldn't even render a guess. But it's
very difficult because there are just so many factors involved that you've never seen before. It's not really a normal election in any sense of the word. I mean, the elections have just been getting more and more extra democratic, so to speak. So that introduces so many pieces onto the board because you just didn't used to have elections where the establishment would be unhappy with either of the candidates running. It was always establishment chosen candidates, whatever, whoever wins, we're fine, right? Now you got this Donald Trump chaos factor that introduces a lot of uncertainty into the picture. And then, I mean, Joe Biden, you've never had anything like that either, where you have a guy who's clearly has his brain leaking out his fucking ears, and they're propping him up because they don't know who else to run. There's never been anything like this.
No, of course not. I will make another election prediction, though, and that's single digits for RFK Jr. We've already seen RFK's polling start to decline. When he first announced his independent run, a few polls had him in the mid to high teens. One or two even had him in the low to mid 20s. But latest round of polling has Trump and Biden above 40 points with RFK in the mid single digits. I think it's 50-50 whether he'll break 5%. I don't think he will break 10. I am predicting he will finish less than 10% because he's just not doing enough to differentiate himself from these two major parties in enough of a way that's going to give more than 10% of people a reason to go vote for him over one of their preferred two major candidates. To the extent that he does pull support, I have said all along, it is my belief that he will take more votes from Biden than from Trump. Polling so far seems to bear that out. So in a sense, that's one prediction I've made that's already somewhat come true. Obviously, the votes aren't counted yet. We're still almost a year away. But the people who really see that Joe Biden and Anthony Blinken and Jake Sullivan are leading the country and the world on a road to infinite war and hell are going to, at the end of the day, vote for the candidate they think can beat Joe Biden, and that's going to be Donald Trump. That's why I don't think Trump is going to lose that many votes to RFK. I think RFK will get more disaffected lefty liberal types than MAGA conservatives. But I don't think there are enough of those disaffected lefty liberal types who are going to be who are not going to be scared into backing Biden in the end. And so I just don't see more than 10% of the vote going to RFK. I think he could get 5. That's 50-50. But if I had to wager a guess, I'd say an election night, you see RFK, and here, I'll be very very exact, which is something that Russell said he didn't want to do. He didn't want to say too much, didn't want to talk too much. I'm going to guess Robert
You
F.
see,
Kennedy
I'm being
Jr.
better about that this year.
Yeah, you're better about that this year. I'm going to go out on a limb. I'm going to say he ends up with 5.5% of the vote.
All right, I'm gonna do a tribute to the late great John McLaughlin. RFK becomes the Republican nominee.
Yeah.
They swap out Biden for Gavin Newsom. Discuss.
Oh, there you go. It's an interesting theory, but I don't think that will happen.
That was exactly what the McLaughlin show was. It was just all like parlor games with insider bullshit. That's all they did.
Yeah. Yep. I remember that show for sure. All right. Russell has another election prediction.
Yeah. Okay. So no matter who it is, I don't think the GOP can lose. I mean, they're really gonna have to bend over triple backward to lose to this fucking crew. I mean, it's possible, but the odds are not in that direction. The House, yeah, I mean, the Democrats have that by a hair at this point. They'll probably lose the House, but I do believe because of abortion, you'll get a split decision. If it wasn't for abortion, it would be all three branches. It would be a clean sweep. But I think the voters will leave the Democrats with one branch of government to have a check on abortion.
Yeah, that would be my guess too. I know conventional wisdom is that the Republicans are a lock for the Senate, but I do agree with Russell that the voters are going to want some kind of split verdict. The Republicans have hurt themselves most in the statewide races since the overturning of Roe versus Wade. It's hard to imagine the Republicans losing the House if they're poised to win the popular vote, which I think they are. I think they will win the popular vote. So if they win the popular vote, I don't see how they lose the House, which leaves the Senate as the only body that Democrats could retain control over. And even in a statewide ballot measure in a place like Kansas, abortion rights win 60-40. So if there's one chamber that the Democrats have a chance to hold, I think it is the Senate. So I would co-sign that. All right. There's been a lot of talk about banning TikTok, both from Democrats and Republicans. But I have a feeling they will not ban TikTok. I think TikTok will live to see another year in the US of A. I don't think it's going to be banned. I think the way they're handling this is they are just throwing off problematic, untrustworthy people like Glenn Greenwald. I think that's how they're going to handle it. I think they're just
They will not be inviting Alex Jones anytime soon to come.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I think they're just going to censor people on TikTok. I don't think they're going to ban the platform outright. I think if they were going to do that, they'd have done it already. It's not to say there's no will to do it, but that seems like if they were going to pull the trigger on that, they'd have done it by now. And they seem to have revealed what their TikTok strategy is, which is, leave it up there for the NPC role players and just take anybody off who's going to, complicate the U.S. war machines narrative. So there will be draconian TikTok censorship. There already has been. But there has been chirping on Capitol Hill from both parties about banning it outright, and I do not think that will happen. I think TikTok survives 2024 in the United States.
I think you're right about that. I think if, in theory, which I'm not in favor of this theory, but if Donald Trump were to win, I think he'd make a move to ban it.
Yeah, that's possible, yes.
And even if it's not Donald Trump, if the GOP take Congress and the presidency, they could push to ban it because it's this Chinese psyop, right? Yeah.
Right.
But not this.
But that'll be 2025.
Not 2024, yeah.
Exactly. I think it survives this year. All right, Russell, we got 2 more each.
All right. So a lot of us would have expected the commercial real estate market to have collapsed already. This is why it has not. Commercial mortgages are not like home mortgages. They don't come due every month. They come due every few years. A high preponderance of these mortgages, I'm not clear on why this is, but a lot of them are timed to come due in 2024. Now, a lot of some landlords of commercial buildings have walked away already, handed the keys back to the bank and just taken the losses. Some of them have held out. Like if you're wondering why the rental prices on these commercial spaces have not collapsed, the investors are between a rock and a hard place. They have gotten into terms on these mortgages that do not give them the flexibility to lower rents and still be able to meet the terms of the mortgage. The margins on commercial real estate are actually very tight. So they're probably hoping for some kind of bailout. They've been praying there would be some kind of deus ex machina that would bail them out. They've just kind of been holding out for these mortgages to come due, hoping something changes. But clearly, post-COVID, the world is never going back to the way that it was. You're never going to need office space in city centers the way that you did before. So as these mortgages come due this year, and a lot of these smaller regional banks are holding these loans. So the first part of my prediction is you see a collapse in commercial real estate. The second part of the prediction is that's going to have a ripple effect through regional banks, and you're probably going to see a need for a lot of bailouts.
All right. Now, this one I'm doing what see this is probably the riskiest prediction I'll make because Russell already bet and lost on this year. But I am going to predict a Ukraine peace deal by April. I think this will go on another few months, but I don't think there is the political will within this country to get funding passed beyond there. And I think that within the next 4 or so months, it's just going to be unviable to keep this war going for Ukraine's part. And I think they will come to some sort of peace agreement that's likely to resemble much of what the first one would have looked like, which could have saved, 500,000 people from death and severe injury. So it's a tragic situation, but I do think this war will end before the summer. So by April, could be March. My guess is no later than April 30th, you will have a ceasefire in Ukraine. Now, Russell bet on a peace deal this year and lost, so this is a risky one for me because you never know. But I do think that this war does not have another year in it, and I don't even think it has another 6 months in it because the support has already dried up. They can't get the money out the door now. So right now, it's only a matter of exhausting what they've got, and they don't have much more.
If it were not an election year, I would. I wouldn't say the odds are for it, but I would say the odds would be better that they'd say fuck it rather than to lose to Russia and start sending U.S. troops in there. In an election year, I can't imagine that they'll do that. So you're probably right.
Yeah. That's my guess. All right, final predictions for the year. Russell has one, and then I've got one. So here's Russell's, not to be construed as financial advice, of course.
Not to be construed as financial advice, but our crypto hogs in our viewership, and we do have some. You know why. You've got the halvening coming in April, where they have the Bitcoin, which actually is going to wipe out a lot of the smaller miners. Because it's gonna cost a lot more to mint Bitcoin, but more importantly, the SEC is going to rule on Bitcoin ETFs, and it looks like they're going to approve them. So the last time Bitcoin went on one of its periodic, crazy, irrational exuberance tulip mania runs during the pandemic, it made it to 70. So between the halving and the ETFs, there's no reason to think it won't hit at least 100. It could even go over that. Now, I have not changed my opinion about crypto, and I know I'll be at odds with some of our audience on this. I still think it's monopoly money. I still think it's not rooted or based in anything. Now, people will say, well, what's other money based in? It's based in the national economy of the country that issues it. There's something there. There's literally nothing really there with these digital currencies. But yeah, I mean, there's nothing there with a Picasso, right? But people will pay millions of dollars for it. I see it more as that. It's more like the art market. It's worth what people think it's worth. So with these ETFs introduced, and with the change in available Bitcoin, yeah, I think it's likely to surpass 100,000. Which is
right,
not
what's it at now? It's in the 40s,
financial
right?
advice. Yeah, right at this moment, it's been hanging around 42, 43. It got as high as 48
All right.
in the last 30 days, and that's before these catalysts have really hit. These catalysts are going to hit, but I think the ETF decision is expected in early January. Um, but Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, they're prone to these manias. Like I don't think it's rational that it's going to hit 100,000, but I think it will. You're also seeing signs as soon as the Fed said that they were going to cut interest rates next year. You started to see the retail Robinhood investors who got burned at the end of the pandemic and lost all their gains. You're starting to see them come back in to the market. I'm starting to see micro caps having irrational runs like you haven't seen in a couple of years. So that whole mania is kind of starting up again. Here's I'm not going to state this as a prediction. I thought about it, but I'm going to there's a soft prediction, okay? I think that we could see a recession this year with an off the hook stock market, just like we saw it during the pandemic, because the stock market has become completely disconnected from the real economy. Because I think you see a recession and the Fed is going to accelerate the cuts in interest rates, which the stock market is going to like. So even as you're seeing rising unemployment and collapsing consumer spending, that'll send the stock market through the roof, especially because over the last couple of years, everyone thought there was going to be this collapse in all assets. I mean, Michael Burry called that wrong. He predicted that for the end of the year. If you don't know, he was the big short guy.
Right.
I think he got high on his own farts there. He got a little full of himself. He got out over his skis. But everyone expected this collapse in all assets, so everyone was keeping their money on the sidelines. Now that it's looking like that's not going to happen, that's a lot of money to come back into the market, and it's going to be completely divorced from the economy on the ground.
All right. So one more prediction for 2024. I just amended this in the banner because I thought it was originally a little too vague. And this is a tough prediction to be specific about. It's even tougher to be specific about it here in East Berlin. But in keeping with Tucker Carlson's monologue from a few months ago, where he said, don't think you're going to get through 2024 with a nice little presidential election between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. Anything can happen. The powers that be are always 10 steps ahead of you. So I will say expect the unexpected, Deus Ex Machina in 2024. Last couple of election cycles, we've had a wrench thrown into the cycle well into the year. The last one was the overturning of Roe versus Wade, and then the one before that was obviously a once-in-a-century pandemic. These things tend to happen in threes, so on a superstitious level, I can predict an unexpected game-changing event in 2024. And then on a less than superstitious level, I will justify my case for real. These are very, very uncertain times. These are very, very desperate times. These are very high stakes and serious times that we're living in right now. We started off this live stream by saying one of the big winners of this year was the emergent BRICS partnership. That means that the powers that be know that they are under threat. And when they know they are under threat, they take that very, very seriously. In 2016, they didn't realize they were under threat. They were sure that Brexit would lose. They were sure that Trump would lose. They thought this was just a bubbling up of populist rage that they could suppress and keep the boat steady on course. They don't feel that secure at the moment. And so don't be surprised if we are having a conversation in the run-up to the 2024 presidential vote that is completely different from anything we're talking about now. That's not to say there's going to be another worldwide crisis. You don't know what it's going to be. That was Tucker's point, is that you never know what the future holds. And so I admit that's a bit of a punt, but you'll know it if and when it happens, whether or not I'm right.
If there was ever a time that was set up for a black swan event, it is this moment. Yes, there could all predictions subject to black swan event. We can say.
Yes, exactly.
Please clap.